Hello, this is the Old Astoria Neighborhood Association. This is a special meeting we're having here in September as a couple of interesting subjects have come up and we've been asked to make presentations. First of all, I want to apologize due to a technical glitch. We are starting at 5:40 instead of 5:30. I hope that everybody waited around and is still watching us. Our presentations today will be first by the New York City Hospitality Alliance. This is particularly timely as tomorrow indoor dining begins in New York. Also, late last week, there were a lot of changes announced in outdoor dining, so there's a lot to go over. I know that I visited many of the restaurants over the last week in the Astoria area. I hope that you all were able to get on. And if you have any questions, you just go to the chat, okay, in Facebook or in YouTube. Ask your questions, and we will do our best to respond to you as quick as we can. Also, after that, we're going to have a presentation by the by the Port Authority of New York, New Jersey, regarding the Laguardia Airtrain with Hersh Parekh. That is, again, that's in the public outreach phase, which ends on October 5th. So we needed to get this in before that date. So I'm looking forward to a great meeting. I'd like to go over a few things, though, an update on what's been happening with Old Astoria. First of all, we got word today. We've been working diligently to get the streets around PS 171 at 14th Street and 29th Avenue safe, more safe, have as many traffic controls put in and school safety zones created. It has been done. Today we had another aspect of that approved. They put stop signs at 12th Street and Astoria Boulevard. This is the route that most of the students from Astoria houses take to get to school in the morning. So this is extremely important. We're very happy and thanks the DOT for moving quickly on this. I'd also like to thank all the work that Andre Streith and Miss Claudia Koger from Astoria Houses put into this, and also PS 171 principal Lisa Stone. So it's great to have a win once in a while, and this is one of those wins. Also, OANA was invited to participate in a climate control conference with Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney, which we did at Hunter Park South in Long Island City. It was a great event. If you go to our Facebook page, you can click on it. You can find out exactly what transpired, but we had a lot of great guests and it was really interesting. And lastly, again, working with Congressman Maloney, as you know, the ferry was extended from Astoria to the Upper East Side, creating a direct route. So this is creating like a bridge between boroughs, a bridge between the Upper East Side and the Astoria, Western Queens waterfront. And we're really excited about this. So we decided to start to work on taking it to the next step, which is create a business development between the Upper East Side and Astoria. Also, for the Congresswoman, this is great because we also, it connects her district the way it was never connected before. So this is a win for everybody. We'd love to have any ideas that you guys may have for promotion. We are now reaching out to sister organizations on the Upper East Side. We'll be setting up conferences to see what we can do to help business on both sides. So we're looking forward to this. You know, the Wall Street and downtown always had Brooklyn and Brooklyn Heights. Long Island City is like an extension of Midtown. So we're looking at Astoria becoming an extension of the Upper East Side and vice versa, the Upper East Side becoming an extension of Astoria. So we look forward to this. And so now our next presenter will be Andrew Rigie, okay? And he's the president of the New York City Hospitality Alliance. I'd like to bring Andrew on now. Andrew? And I would like to just leave it to you. There's a lot to go over, so let's get started as quick as we can. Again, if everybody has questions, they can put it in the chat and ask their questions. We'll do our best to answer it. We'd also ask if anybody's viewing on YouTube and Facebook to put their name and contact information in there so we can reach out to you with further information as it comes to us. Thank you. Andrew.
Beautiful. Well, thank you, Richard, and the whole OANA team and everyone for joining us. My name's Andrew Rigie. I run the New York City Hospitality Alliance. We are a not-for-profit trade association that represents restaurants, bars, nightclubs throughout the 5 boroughs. And today I'm going to cover a couple different important and timely items. And then because we can really get into the weeds on each point I'll probably bring up, we'll leave some time for Q&A. And then some of the things, if I'm unable to answer them here on the spot, perhaps, Richard, we can circle back and try to get those additional answers for folks on this call. So before we get to outdoor dining and indoor dining, I want to give 2 important updates. One related to rent. As you've probably seen, or if you haven't yet, the governor did extend the eviction on the moratorium on commercial evictions for another month. We hope he'll continue to do so. Just yesterday, Mayor de Blasio signed an extension to the law, which we had enacted, I think back in May now, which suspends the enforcement of personal liability guarantees or good guy clauses in leases. When we had the law passed originally earlier on in the pandemic, I guess we didn't think, or we hoped that we would not be in the same situation here at the end of September, which was when that law was set to expire. So the mayor did sign it for another 6 months. Hopefully we'll be in a situation in 6 months from now where that law will not have to be extended, but it's critically important. It suspends the enforcement of your good guy or personal liability guarantees in your leases during the covered period, which is basically defined as kind of the time COVID hit till present, and now extended for another 6 months. This hopefully gives you some ability to negotiate and get out of your leases if need be, or give you at least some personal, safety or comfort, if that's the right word, of knowing that your landlord can't go against your personal assets for your default in your lease. Now, just to make note, and it's an important note, there are some folks in the real estate industry that have challenged this. There was the first hearing. We're still waiting on whether or not there will be an injunction. We hope not. We hope that this law is strong and it stands up in court. We believe it will, because we've obviously know the devastation of so many small business owners have lost their businesses, and so many will. But if we were to add on top of that the ability for landlords to go against people's personal assets when your business can't pay rent by no fault of your own, due to a government mandated shutdown or a government mandate of limiting your operation so you're unable to pay your rent and other expenses, it would be a real tragedy to allow that to happen. So that's a very important extension. There are 2 bills in the state, or I say 1 bill in the state Assembly and Senate, which would require that business interruption insurance claims are being paid out. There's also a bill in Congress that's similar. The provisions and the mechanics are a little bit different, but the issue of business interruption insurance is one that I'm sure many of you are familiar with. It's been a horrible situation. We have small business owners that have been paying premiums for business interruption insurance for years, and now they have a massive business interruption, and really across the board, insurers are denying these claims, whether or not your policy includes or excludes or is somewhat silent on virus or pandemic related business interruption matters. So we are pushing at the state to get these bills passed. I would urge all of you to contact your state assembly member and state senator and your members of Congress and U.S. senators, and urge them to support the legislation that would have business interruption insurance paid out. Another big note that happened last night, the House of Representatives have included both the Restaurants Act and the Save Our Stages Act in the new HEROES Act, which is a big comprehensive stimulus bill. But those 2 policies will help get cash into the hands of restaurant and nightlife operators to cover rents, utilities, labor costs, vendor expenses, and all of these other expenses that have really been piling up and are key to getting paid if our industry is to survive, or we can save as many businesses as possible. So that's incredibly important. We're hoping that the House will vote and pass this bill this week. We are in regular contact with Senator Schumer and Gillibrand's office, and I know the senator is trying to get the Republicans to the table and negotiate this as well, because if it doesn't happen now, before the next election, before the upcoming election, who knows what's going to happen. And we can do a lot locally, but we really desperately need the federal government to stand up and save these businesses. We're not asking for a rescue plan, so to speak. We didn't do anything wrong. People didn't not like our burgers or like our service. We've been mandated closed by government. Now we need that same exact government to help us survive and reopen and do so safely in an appropriate way. So those are two important updates, or I should say three important updates. But now to what I know the main focus is of this conversation. First, I'll talk a little bit about outdoor dining, and then I'll focus on indoor dining, which is set to start in New York City tomorrow, September 30th, at a 25% occupancy. So for outdoor dining, early on in the pandemic, we had said that passing or creating outdoor dining was going to be critically important to help support our city's restaurant industry. How do we reimagine how we use public space to support our small businesses, to support jobs, and to really bring an energy and a vibrancy back to the streets of New York City? And I think by all estimates, this plan to reimagine how we use public space in New York City has really just been incredible. The feedback I've heard from all different parts of the city, from all different people, even those that were skeptical of the plan, have generally been overwhelmingly, this program has been a success. So much so that the city council and the mayor have announced they want to make outdoor dining permanent. And we think that's incredible. It would also allow for additional outdoor heating elements. Obviously, as the temperature gets cooler, as it's starting to do now, customers are only going to sit outside if they can stay warm. So a general overview of what has been proposed, and there is a city council hearing tomorrow afternoon I'll be testifying at, as well as ongoing conversations with the council and the de Blasio administration. But some high level points, and then as I said before, we can certainly get into specific questions, is it would make the roadway seating permanent. It would also create a permanent program for open streets where you can close down streets, if not permanently, on certain days and times to allow restaurants and other uses make their way into the street. It would allow, importantly, restaurants to expand to adjacent storefronts. One of the things that we've heard through the outdoor dining experiment is if you have a more narrow storefront, you may only be able to get a certain number, or I should say a small number of tables and chairs out there, because you're only permitted to use the sidewalk space and the roadway space or the curb space for the width of your building. But often you'll have a neighboring landlord who says, no, you can set up tables and chairs here, or maybe there's an eyeglass shop and they say, sure, we close at 6 p.m., 7 p.m. You're welcome to set up here for outdoor service. We're not using it. Technically, that's not allowed. The new program would allow you, upon approval and getting consent, to use that adjacent space to give you some more space for tables and chairs, which is going to be important for a lot of restaurants participating in the program. We'd also continue the self-certification program, just like the current outdoor dining program versus the old existing city sidewalk cafe permit. You would not need to hire an architect and have them doing all the renderings, which can be very expensive. It would be a self-certification program, quick, easy, not as much of the bureaucracy and red tape. So cut down on the time to get set up, as well as allow you to more affordably basically create your own designs, submit it to the city, say, this is what I'm going to do, this is how we're meeting all of the requirements, and stand it up really quickly versus the many months and very expensive program which currently exists. I should also mention at tomorrow's hearing, there's going to be 2 amendments to the existing sidewalk cafe laws. One would allow someone taking over a new space to operate under the prior restaurant's approved sidewalk cafe. Now, if you take over a restaurant and it's an enclosed cafe, you can go in and continue to operate under the prior operator's conditions. But if it's an unenclosed cafe, you cannot do that, and you have to go into a multi-month process to get your sidewalk cafe set up. So if someone's bold enough in the coming months or years to open a new restaurant in the city, we think we should cut out the bureaucracy and the red tape, let them get set up quickly, operate under the prior restaurant's approved setup, so they can get set up and start generating revenue quickly and not have to wait 5-6 months to do so. But this program that we're talking about now will also allow propane portable heaters to be used not in the streets, but on the sidewalk if you meet specific safety requirements. We're also looking on it to expand how electric heaters are used as well. Currently, it's kind of a gray area with the electric heaters, but for hardline natural gas, that's permitted, but that is a expensive, time-consuming permitting process that you have to go through. So we're really hoping that the propane and electric can be stood up quickly, because as we know, every day that goes by, the weather is starting to drop, and this is a matter of survival for so many small businesses. Restaurants would also be able to use tent enclosures. I presume a lot of this will be more COVID related, but we shall see. In partial tent enclosures, it looks like at least 50% of the tent's side walls will have to be open to allow for the free flow of air in and out, and electrical heaters will be able to be used. There are some other requirements if you were to use other types of heaters, for safety purposes. If someone is to enclose a whole tent, basically turning it into an indoor structure, the occupancy would be capped at 25% or whatever the indoor dining requirements are. We still need to figure out exactly how do you figure out 25% occupancy of a tent, but that, along with some of the other requirements, such as how the gas propane heaters would have to be set up. I imagine they may have to be 5 feet from a wall. You cannot store them indoors at night. So while we think this can help a lot of businesses, just to be clear, because of different safety and other considerations, not every single business will be able to use the heat. So I really recommend, before anyone goes and spends money on heat lamps or doing any modifications to your outdoor dining or building new outdoor dining installations, please wait until all the details are finalized. It'll probably take a couple of more weeks, but the last thing we want is for people to make these investments only to find out that, they're not approved. The one thing I can say, and I know some other restaurateurs have done, they've gone and purchased propane heat lamps and others, and they've gotten a 90-day, money back guarantee or return policy, because we know the mad dash is already on, and we imagine there may be some limited supply. So if you do buy anything, please make sure you have a return policy. Don't do anything until everything's final, because we'd hate to see, the city coming out or state and saying, well, you did that, but you got to take it all down now. So I'll leave that for now on the outdoor dining, and then we can come back and try to answer specific questions, but focus on indoor dining. So as you know, the indoor dining starts tomorrow, September 30th, at 25% occupancy indoors, with a roadmap from Governor Cuomo if compliance is okay and if the infection rate stays low. I know we've seen some uptick, which is of concern in some New York City neighborhoods. Thankfully, it's not related to dining, but those are really the two considerations, because as we know, since June, the rest of New York State has been operating indoors at 50%, and thankfully we have not seen an uptick in infection. So by November 1st, if everything goes according to plan, then we hope to increase the occupancy to 50%. We know specifically for those restaurants, I mean, across the board, but 25% is extremely difficult. And let's be fair, even pre-pandemic, when restaurants had 100% indoor occupancy, operating a successful restaurant or bar in the city of New York was so difficult. So 50%, 25% outdoor dining, none of these are solutions on their own to save the future of our industry. That's why we need the federal government to pass the Restaurants Act, to pass the Save Our Stages Act, and continue to enact all of these different policies to give as many businesses as much of a chance as possible in as many different ways as possible to survive. So that's right. Tomorrow, 25% indoor occupancy, hopefully 50%, everything goes well around November 1st. 25% occupancy is based on a business's certificate of occupancy for the area. So if a restaurant's located on 2 floors, or some setups may each have a certificate of occupancy, that is 25% of that certificate of occupancy for the area, and it is exclusive of employees. So it is exclusive of employees, which is important, gives you some more space. I will note, if you're doing family meal or just an employee sitting down to eat, that employee will most likely be counted towards your occupancy. So that's something to definitely consider. Closing time is midnight, 7 days a week. However, and this is an important consideration because it's different than the outdoor dining. Currently, outdoor dining stops at 11 p.m. every night, and that means operation, service, customers gone. For indoor dining, 7 days a week, it ends at midnight, but you have an additional 30 minutes for customers to finish their meals, finish their drinks, then the establishment must close and everyone must leave. So you can't serve food or alcohol after midnight, but you have that 30-minute buffer to allow your guests to finish up. Bars. All bars are closed. They must be converted to service bars only. So no sitting at bars, no having people stand up and go order a drink or go place an order. They must all be closed. We are speaking with the Cuomo administration on some changes. We know, particularly, for example, like some Japanese style restaurants, sushi, yakitori, where it's not really a traditional bar per se, but it's more of a dining counter. Will that be permissible? I don't know. Under the current guidelines, it's somewhat questionable. Versus a bar versus a dining counter. Is a bar technically a bar that is on your liquor license plans that were approved versus a dining counter where there is no alcohol even being served? That's something we are working on trying to get clarity, and as soon as we have, we will let folks know, because we know that's important. I want to go back to one thing on the occupancy. 25% table spacing needs to be 6 feet apart. So tables need to be placed 6 feet apart. However, if that is not feasible, tables can be closer, but then the business needs to erect barriers. And within the guidance, which I hope you've all seen and gone through very closely, there are specs for what those barriers, as far as height, etc., need to meet. Very important, no face mask, no entry into the restaurant at all. Now, customers do not have to wear face masks when they are sitting at the table, but if they get up to the restroom or when they're getting up to leave, they must put the face mask on. A best practice, well, not a requirement, and I'd really urge all of you to implement this, is to ask customers, particularly when a server comes to the table to take your order, to wear a face mask. And when you're not eating, wear a face mask for safety precautions, but also out of respect. Again, it's not a requirement, but I think that's definitely a best practice. But if anyone is standing in the restaurant, they must wear a face mask. I'd also recommend that when you have guests that are waiting, have them wait outside. that 25% would likely be counted towards your occupancy. You also don't want an inspector to come by and see people standing around, particularly not standing around with a drink. As far as our understanding, the governor's executive order that requires a quote unquote food item be served with food is still in effect. I want to just reiterate something for you as kind of a best practice in the way I think inspectors will be looking at this. This is about a structured meal. We're not talking about people coming in and just kind of doing traditional bar activity where you're sitting, drinking hour after hour. We're really trying to focus on indoor dining, not indoor drinking. So you do need to meet those requirements, and the others that have been put forth. Air filtration systems, which is another big issue. So there's basically three categories. I'll do my best to break them down. If you have an air filtration system that has a MERV 13 filter or greater, that's required to be used. The second category is for businesses that have a air filtration system, but it cannot fit a MERV 13 filter or greater. And then there's the third category, which is the business doesn't have access to the air filtration system, or they just don't have one. So technically, under the guidelines, it says that if you have a MERV 13, you need to use it. If you can't, for some reason, you need to get a certification from an HVAC technician, an engineer, or they list out a bunch of different types of professionals that can certify you're unable to get access to these filters. Now, I know I've spoken with multiple different distributors, and for many of them, MERV 13 or greater filters are on back order for months. So you wouldn't even be able to get them tomorrow, even if you tried ordering, a month ago. For the second category, you need to get a certification from an HVAC, expert, technician, engineer that says, I have an air filtration system, but it does not meet or does not fit a MERV 13 or greater filter. In that scenario, you would also be required to get a letter certified from one of those professionals saying that your system does not fit one of these filters. In both those scenarios, you then need to meet as many of these different requirements that you can, which are listed out in the documents provided by the state. And they include everything from running your air filtration system, 2 hours before you open and 2 hours after, keeping windows and doors for airflow as much as possible, purchasing standalone air filtration systems. And I'll say, I've seen many on the market that look really good, and I know every dollar is so important these days, but some of them can be purchased for several $100s. For a couple $1,000s, you could probably really set up your restaurant with many of these air filtration systems. There's also UV light solutions. So really to do as best as you can. We're waiting on a little clarity again from the state on how this process will go, but I highly recommend, and I can't guarantee that this will meet an inspector's approval, but if you can't get an inspector or a technician to come in and certify you can't get MERV 13 filters or your system doesn't fit them by tomorrow, try to at least get an email from them saying your system does not meet or you can't get access to the filters, and make sure that there's always a manager on premise that has access to that email to be able to show to an inspector. I think all of these things are going to be critically important, not only for compliance purposes, but also giving your customers and the dining public a sense of comfort that your restaurant is not only meeting these requirements, but has really put a lot of thought into keeping not only your customers, but your employees safe, during this time. So I think a lot of that is important because we really don't know what consumer purchasing behavior is going to be yet. I'm sure based on a restaurant's customer demographic, it's going to differ. So that's important. obviously kind of setting up your employees and your customers and let them know that they're part of compliance when it comes to the masks and everything along those lines. We are really all in this together. A couple of the other important requirements. One is for contact tracing purposes. You need to take the contact information, name, phone number, email address of at least one person in each party. That is for contact tracing. So if they believe a case of COVID may be related to your restaurant, they can start contacting people and obviously trying to quickly mitigate the spread. The other has to do with temperature. You're required to take temperature of everyone coming in to the restaurant or the bar. I will note that the state's requirement says employees have to, and customers' temperature cannot exceed 100 degrees. Some of you may recognize that the CDC and the federal government says that is not 100 degrees, but 100.4 degrees. So we are again trying to get some clarity on this. We really would like the state requirements to meet what the federal government is saying for consistency and legal purposes to make sure that you can be in compliance with all these requirements. I know it is so much. I know it is so difficult. I know it's a long way and an uncertain way to recover, but I keep saying there's no way the city of New York will ever recover if our city's restaurants and bars and cultural establishments are not at the core of that recovery. It's going to be tough. Inspections, I know with the outdoor dining has been particularly tough, especially in certain neighborhoods. I just really urge all of you to do everything you possibly can to meet all of the requirements. Understand this is kind of an ongoing and evolving situation, but we need to comply. We need to keep the infection rates down so we can continue to increase the occupancy safely and build our industry back. And like I said before, there's not going to be one policy that's going to be able to save everyone. It's going to take ongoing policies from all levels of government on an ongoing basis. And, you know, the New York City Hospitality Alliance will be fighting for you around the clock at all levels of government, doing everything we can. And we urge you to get engaged with us. I will put in the chat our email, social media handles. You can certainly join our newsletter. We put out important info constantly about all of this. We host seminars. We're always speaking with the press, getting our message out there, and really engaging all of you. You are so important to the political process. Your voices truly, truly matter. Your businesses truly, truly matter. And if we are united, we can really fight for survival. So we're here for you in any way we possibly can. I know there's a lot of dense stuff I just threw at everyone. So I think I'll leave it at that, Richard, and then happy to answer any questions. Oh, sorry. Richard, I think you may be muted or I don't hear you.
There we go. Sorry. Okay. I just wanted to let everybody know. First of all, thank you, Andrew, for a great presentation. We're having some issues with the Facebook chat. It's not going into our platform here, so I'm going to have to check it directly on Facebook. Before that, I may have missed it. Did you go over anything to do with the current legal suits that are out there and what their status is? I know that I've had quite a few questions on that, and also something about the issues with insurance companies and the fact that they're denying claims for business disruption. Oh, I think, hold on. Are you on chat?
I did address the lawsuits concerning the suspension of personal liability guarantees. Okay, I addressed kind of the legislative framework of the business interruption claims and that they're all being denied. There are, I think the number is in thousands of lawsuits around the country right now from business owners of all kinds against the insurance companies. There have been some positive outcomes, some negative outcomes, but like everything in the court system, it's going to take, many years for this to make its way through that process. So really, the legal action probably isn't anything that would happen soon, and that's why we really need some of these legislative fixes. And I should also note that within the HEROES Act, that includes the Restaurants Act and the Save Our Stages Act, there is additional rounds of PPP, the Paycheck Protection Loans, more EIDL loans as well.
Okay, great. As usual, you're extremely thorough, which you were the last time. We really, really appreciate that. I'm going to have to, first of all, Victor, if you can hear me, he's monitoring the YouTube comments. Is there anything
no
coming
questions
through
on YouTube, but I think there are a couple on Facebook.
Yes. Okay. And let me go back to Facebook here, since it's not appearing for some reason there. Okay. Okay, we have an inquiry from Neil. His comment is, I can't see the comment section, but has anyone inquired about using enclosed bubble tents to separate customers if 6 foot can't be maintained? There was some discussion about them in a few Astoria Facebook groups, such as Growing Up Astoria. I'm not sure what a bubble tent is, to be honest with you.
Yes, actually, so I'm on the Upper West Side, and there's been a lot of attention because a restaurant in this neighborhood did these kind of bubbles. They almost look like igloos, and they unzip inside. It looks like within the proposal from the de Blasio administration that these types of structures will be permitted. I think all the details are being sorted out right now, whether they are open or closed. I think if they're fully enclosed and there's no openings, like the 50% opening requirement or 50% of the sides requirement, which I mentioned earlier, they may be difficult for the fact that 25% occupancy and something that's, 8 feet by 8 feet is going to be very small. But, right now I know people are using them. I'd encourage, to keep the sides open, at least 50% of the sides open. And then hopefully within the next, week or two, we'll have more definitive answers on that. Again, like I said, a lot of this stuff is kind of a work in progress.
Mm-hmm. Okay, another question from Joe Nocerino, who works with the borough president. I know Joe. Hi, Joe. How you doing? He says, wait, missed it. 100.4 degrees is the threshold, not 99. I guess he wanted confirmation on that.
So the state's requirement for New York City indoor dining is 100 degrees. The CDC and the federal government's requirements are 100.4 degrees. But anything in excess of those temperatures would require you kind of deny entry. So we really need to get them to match up because you could be in violation of, the federal law by complying with the states. So.
Okay, good.
Richard, we got some YouTube chat is working, so
okay,
I'll
good.
put it on the screen now.
Okay, from Sebastian Rosario, what are the requirements for adjacent store seating?
Sebastian, so currently adjacent store seating is not technically allowed. However, under the new proposal from both the mayor, and the proposed legislation in the city council, for which there's a hearing tomorrow, adjacent seating will be permitted in the roadway and hopefully on the sidewalk as well. Those specific requirements are being worked through now. You would have to, I imagine, get consent by the neighboring landlord. One caveat that is going to be included, and we have been pushing for, is that the landlord could not rent that space. So they would have to give you approval, but it was public space and you would be able to use it. So, the neighboring landlord couldn't say, you give me X money a month and you can use it. And it would likely be for the, adjacent width of that space. And that could be subject again to the same types of requirements that the current outdoor seating is. So it's not allowed if you're right in front of a bus lane, or you have to be a specific distance from a fire hydrant, or if it's a no standing zone. There could be some things that would still prohibit that use, but it would provide a system for you to get approval from the neighbor to use that space. It couldn't be rented. And then we're also going to be working with the state liquor authority to ensure that as long as it is contiguous space, your current liquor license would continue to allow you to serve alcohol in that area.
Another question from Maria Mihalachi. This is, why did you block all the streets in Astoria? It's criminal what the mayor is doing. I would like to answer a little bit of this. There are 2 streets that are blocked in Astoria, 3 blocks on Ditmars, and I think 5 or 6 blocks on 31st Avenue. I can only speak for Ditmars and streets where there are restaurants. 31st Avenue is not being closed for restaurant use. It's just being closed for residential use, so they can utilize that space for their recreational activities. But as far as for restaurants, there's a number of things that I think that are very important. Number one, safety. There's been at least a minimum of 5 accidents so far where cars have actually run into the barriers of restaurants. Luckily, there's been no deaths or I don't think serious injury at this point, but it can be an issue. Number 2, it allows for more people to walk on the street so that there's more possibility of safe social distancing. Number 3, it keeps there's often people that cause trouble that like to use their vehicles and show them off. I think historically we've seen that everywhere from Shore Boulevard in Astoria for over the last 20, 30 years, and then migrated up to Broadway, or excuse me, to Steinway, and we had a lot of trouble here earlier in the year. And if you close the street, the vehicles can't go there. And it's just what happened on Shore Boulevard. When they closed the street to vehicles, this element no longer came. So I think that, in fact, it would make it much safer. These are some of the reasons why I think that closing the street to vehicles for restaurants is a positive. And, it frankly gives more seating to the restaurants, too, allowing them to survive. I think Ditmars has really been a wonderful area. The comments are very positive on it. And we hope to include other areas in the near future. Any other comments, Andrew, on that subject?
No, I think, how the city of New York utilizes public space for which different uses has been a talk or part of the discussion for, many, many years. And I know there's a lot of people with a lot of different thoughtful and passionate views on it. I think, from the pandemic, we've at least seen how when we've allowed restaurants to use it, it's really helped them. And a lot of people, support the idea. And I think, for many years, there's going to be conversations about how do we use this space, whether it's just the parking spots or, full or partial street closures. So I know I'm very familiar with all the different opinions on it. And I, personally, from my experience, I found it very helpful. I think long term, it does help create a more livable city where you can kind of engage and use public space and, not so crowded on sidewalks, but clearly, people have cars and they need to get around, and everyone's voice should be heard. And hopefully we can continue to modify all these programs that help as many people as possible and respect as many of the different viewpoints as possible.
We have a comment from AFC on the same subject. It's just a comment. The block streets are amazing, and we should have more streets open to people, dining, and recreation. So
there you go.
Yeah, different opinions.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. So, I think that maybe we're not get all the messages here. Everyone, that seems to be the messages we've got from the questions so far. I would say that this chat this event will stay up. Just click on the link if you want to. If you came in late and missed anything, because I know quite a few people came in at 6 o'clock, and they missed the first half hour. I'm not sure why that happened, or the first 20 minutes. So you can send us the questions. We will forward them to Andrew, and he can respond back. We'll definitely get back to you. We just did get one more question. Okay, what happens if the infection rate inches up to above 4%? Will the restaurants be shut down again? Oh, you're muted.
Very good question. Based on both comments from the governor and mayor, I don't think that there is a hard, fast line that says if we hit X rate, everything gets shut down again. I think both, it was said today that where we are seeing spikes in these neighborhoods, they're tracking where they are coming from. There could be specific neighborhoods that get shut down if need be. But certainly if we go to a citywide 4% average, it's something, for concern. So it'll be looked at. And I think, again, like I said, it's going to be a combination of many factors. And that's what makes this whole recovery period, if we can call it that, so uncertain. But that's why making sure we follow all the precautions, etc., is going to be very important for us to keep that rate down, so we don't get into a situation where those types of decisions need to be made. And I just also say, I put, and it looks maybe in the private chat function, I did put a link to sign up for the Hospitality Alliance's newsletter, along with our Twitter handles, both the organization and mine. So, we do a lot of.
I'll be posting it in the chat here.
Yeah, posted. Great. One other question just came about, which I can maybe answer and you can also comment on. Where is it now? How can we try to close Steinway Street for restaurants, especially from 30th Avenue to 25th? That's the area I know where a lot of hookah bars exist. From my standpoint, there is a procedure, number one, through the DOT to request closure. We actually have already put such a request in for 30th Avenue. It was denied initially. We hope to resurrect that. But in general, if you look on our website, we actually put together an op-ed. And what we are really calling for here is sort of a holistic look at the whole neighborhood. I think that if we start doing this piecemeal, somebody is going to get left out. So I think what's important is to look at the entire neighborhood, particularly starting this winter or this late fall, if we can put a group together and do that. And make sure that we give everybody a little bit of the action, okay? I don't want one neighborhood to be cut off because a street next to it is closed. There should somehow be able to share the space. So I would like to look at that. Steinway Street, it's definitely a lot of restaurants on that street. We'll have to see. The process has to go through a panel. The panel consists of the NYPD, the DOT, the MTA. I think there's a couple other agencies involved here. So it's you have to go through a pretty rigorous process. But, if you think you have enough people that are interested, get a hold of us. We can help fill out or we as a nonprofit can actually sponsor the request, and we can go from there. We can try. So I can be reached at through the website. Any comments, Andrew?
No, I think that, makes sense. I think I've been hearing from neighborhoods all across the city that really, have enjoyed the street closures and allowing, restaurants and others to come out. So I definitely think you need to be organized because there is a lot that goes into it. So yeah, I'd say definitely, working with groups like yours and can be an incredibly helpful way to get the information and help streamline this process.
I have another question here from Eleni Goros. Okay. If we do not open for indoor dining, but continue with outdoor and to go only, do we still need to take temperatures of customers and keep their information?
Very good question. This is among one of them that we are still trying to get exact clarity on. If you have not, and again, like I said, I can't give you 100% confirmation, but if you do not participate in indoor dining and you do not sign the acknowledgement that you're required to, that you're participating in it, it would seem that technically you do not have to meet the indoor dining requirements. Therefore, the answer would be no. As I'm sure you all know, sometimes the things that a law or regulation say and the way it are implemented do not always match up. So I hope we can get answers soon, and then we'll certainly let you know. But it would seem from a technical perspective, if you are not doing indoor dining, if you have not signed the acknowledgement that you're participating in indoor dining, then the current outdoor dining requirements will continue to apply, which do not require the contact tracing or the temperature requirements.
Okay.
And again, that's not legal advice, but it's just a comment based on the information as I see it at the present moment.
Common sense, which is definitely a good thing to follow as much as possible. Okay. All right. One last. Sorry.
To say that, Richard. Look, a lot of these requirements, and I know because we hear day in and day out about all these different scenarios, that come into play. Do your best to just use common sense with everything. There's some stuff we hope for these bigger picture issues, we will get answers. There is going to be stuff inevitably where you're just not going to get concrete clarity on. So use common sense and always try to put public health and safety first. And if you do that, I'm not saying you're 100% in the okay, but it's better than being, oh, who knows, and kind of taking a shortcut or something.
Good. Okay. So very good. Listen, if anybody has any other questions, if they can put them on right now. If not, you can put them on later, and we will forward them to Andrew. Andrew, you did a great job as usual. You've covered everything. So many answers. Again, people that signed on late, you can actually watch the recorded version of it. And if you have questions, you can send them to us, and we will get the answers as quickly as possible back to you. Everybody, good luck tomorrow when you start this up. I know the weather's not going to be too great tomorrow from what I understand, so maybe it's a good time to actually get your operations up in order. And we hope that this is the beginning of the end, so that we're back to normal, hopefully, God willing, by next spring. So thank you so much. Thank you, Andrew, and thanks for joining us.
You got it. Thanks, everyone.
Okay.
So long. Yeah. Wishing you all the best. And like I said, the Hospitality Alliance is here for you. So we'll keep on fighting. Thanks, Richard.
Thank you. Okay, bye. Okay, next, I'd like to bring up a few representatives of elected officials, but first, briefly, I'd like to bring up our host, Victor Prado. He donates his time to these presentations every month. We really were indebted to him for what he does on his donations. And he's just a great guy anyways. He's been very helpful to a lot of people. So I give him a minute to introduce himself and what he does.
Sure. Thank you, Richard, for the opportunity. My name is Victor Prado. I have a social media marketing agency called Ninja Man Media. I'm going to put it on the screen now so you guys can enjoy my great logo. All jokes aside, what I do is I provide advertising on Facebook, on Instagram for small businesses to kind of get your foot in the door. A lot of small businesses just depend on word of mouth or just local advertising. But with the power of the internet, and especially now in New York City and Long Island as well, which I service both, you can leverage the internet and target and reach a specific target audience using Facebook and Instagram advertising for a very small fee. You can really leverage and bring a lot of leads and sales to your small business. This is effective with restaurants, retail stores, you name it. So if you're interested in my services, feel free to reach out to me. Richard has my information. Feel free to reach out to Richard. He's acting as my agent.
No, don't say that. I can't do that. This is a nonprofit, but we do really appreciate your donations. And
no problem. I'm always here, willing to help my community. I do this out of my heart. Business comes as a fruit of just acts of community service. So I'm not really worried about that. So
thank you, Victor. Thanks a lot. Okay, I'd like to bring up Ernie Brooks next. Ernie is the representative in our area for Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney.
Well, hello, and thank you, Richard, for another really informative meeting so far. Learned a lot from your speaker. Also, thanks to Victor, because when I first saw the word StreamYard, I thought, oh my God, another platform that's going to be obscure. We won't be able to figure out how to get on it, but it works well. Everything seems to be working well. Anyway, also thank you, Richard, for attending the press conference on the waterfront last Saturday, where Carolyn introduced this new bill on sort of to mark the end of Climate Week. And we had a lot of representatives there from different neighborhood groups besides yours. We had the leader of Lisa Bloodgood from Newtown Creek Conservancy, and Rob Bash from the Hunters Point Parks Conservancy, and we had someone from the Sunrise Movement, we had someone from Harbor Labs, we had someone from the Sierra Club. We had a whole range of groups that are concerned with the environment. And
Conservation League, yeah.
Conservation, yeah, the League of Conservation Voters, actually.
Yep.
The head of that. And
yeah, it was a great event. I enjoyed it. And it's the outlook there is beautiful.
It is, and it's over a part of the waterfront which is actually built to be sustainable, where the water comes in, goes into a sort of a place where it's held by seagrass. It's the model of a soft water's edge. Instead of building walls to block it where erosion will attack it, this one is actually a fairly efficient way to deal with the potentials of storm surge and sea level rise. And that's something, of course, that's going to be an issue as probably will happen. More does, even though it shouldn't be, get built right on the water's edge because, when development comes back. But so, thanking you for that again, Richard. And also, I know that Kate Peterson was there from the Proud Historian. And again, another shout out for her and the work that you've been supporting her and doing and cleaning up the parks up there in North Astoria, something which has also been going on in all the waterfront parks in the lower end of Long Island City near where I live. And Rob Bash and Lisa Bloodgood have been working on that. Also in the other part in Greenpoint, in another part of Carolyn's district, all of which work has been great. And then I also want to say is, yes, I have a long email outlining all the provisions on this new version of the HEROES Act, which Nancy Pelosi and the Democratic Conference are putting forward, which is sort of a compromise trying to meet in the middle with the Republicans. Now, all we can say is we're hoping that they will come and meet the Democrats halfway, and this bill will finally get put into law. We'll see. Because the Senate is, as we know, has stood in the way of anything happening up to now. But the fact is that there are the provisions there for restaurants and for our stages, which is obviously, as musicians, that's very important to so many. We know how important that is to so many people. So, all I can say is she's down there pushing as well as she can to get that passed, and we'll see what happens. And also listening is also something she's been involved in. I know she had a meeting a few weeks ago that was set up by Jonathan Forgash and Queens Together. And there was also a lot of restaurant owners on that call. And she's really involved in that, trying to do something about making that better. And let's hope that this new rule about, hopefully the 25% will expand. That all depends on how COVID goes, but with the introduction of the possibility of this outdoor dining, which if it works out, I think that's great. I think outdoor fun, especially during the last month or so, it's really been, kind of an actual plus in some neighborhoods, just in the way the neighborhood feels. So that's great that that's going on. Another thing that she's trying to make sure that gets into this bill is more help for the Farms to Family programs, which has really supplied a lot of the food pantries in Queens. and which has been a great program, bringing fresh produce from farms in upstate and Long Island and getting it direct to the people that really need, they need food, and especially for them getting really good food has been really a positive thing. So again, that's been on the verge of running out. They found a little bit more money, which has supplied them till, I think, through mid-October. But again, this is all dependent on getting these bills passed in Congress. So I think that's pretty much it.
Okay, thank you. And by the way, also, what I really enjoyed during that conference was the statue.
Oh, yes. The heroic woman.
Yes, there was a great new statue that was just placed in Hunters Point Park. And which was, I guess, from a sculptor based in Long Island City.
Yes, and I know
it was a very interesting. You should check it out. It was really a nice setup. It was on a sort of a garden there. That's curated garden, I guess you could say it. That was.
It's on the old railroad tracks there, which used to lead to the water, and then you see the statue at the end of the tracks. It's actually really is beautiful.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Ernie. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Richard.
Okay, now I'd like to bring up from the staff of Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, Daniel Brontius, if I'm saying that correctly. Brontius. Thank you, Daniel.
Hello, Bontius. Yeah, thank you.
Bontius, no R. It's my mistake. I keep doing that. I thought I was wrong.
That's all right. Thank you for having me, Richard. This is the first time I've been able to attend the meeting since COVID started, but I have been in touch with you over the summer and throughout the pandemic over a few things, and I know that the members of OANA have reached out to our office with some for comment on certain things. So, for those of you watching, please continue to reach out to Richard or directly to me if you have questions for our office. And I'm staying plugged in with what OANA is working on, and will pop in when I can. So anyway, I'm happy to be here tonight. I'm the operations coordinator for the office of Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez. A couple updates. In September, the Congresswoman hosted, or rather earlier this month, I should say, she hosted an all-Spanish census town hall to target the most undercounted communities in our district. Naleo participated, and it was televised on Telemundo. And we are currently planning a joint town hall for October with Representative Earl Blumenauer, which will be on October 15th at 7 p.m. We'll share the registration link with Richard once it's ready, but you can also, and we'll also send it to our mailing list once the event's finalized. And if you haven't signed up for our mailing list already, you can do so at the links that I'll share here in the chat. I don't know, Richard, will go back to the public or if you need to forward them, but I've got to sign up for the Spanish and English language newsletters for people to sign up for. Okay. Quick legislative update. Earlier this month, the Congresswoman and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer urged FEMA to release funeral assistance to the families of COVID-19 victims. The representatives reached out to FEMA requesting this assistance in the spring and received no response. Since then, however, President Trump has authorized FEMA to use other needs assistance for all the COVID-19 major disaster declarations through the Low Wage Assistance Executive Order. This presidential authorization should give FEMA the authority to provide disaster funeral assistance to New York State and any other state that requests it. So the members have urged FEMA to finalize that. We don't have a final resolution on that quite yet. Last week, the House also passed a continuing resolution to keep the government funded until December 11th to prevent a government shutdown. And the Congresswoman voted against H.R. 4447. This legislation would have prolonged our dependence on fossil fuels. While it takes important steps to support environmental justice and renewable energy, it not only fails to address the climate crisis we face, but includes unacceptable giveaways to fossil fuel corporations. So Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez urged Democratic leadership to remove troubling elements of this bill and put forth transformative legislation that fundamentally addresses the global climate crisis before the end of this Congress, like the Green New Deal. As Ernie mentioned, this week, the House is considering the updated, slimmed down version of the HEROES Act. And the Congresswoman will be pushing to include as much relief for New York 14 as possible, including extended unemployment benefits, nationwide mortgage and rent relief, another round of stimulus payments for all, and expanded support for state and local communities. In addition, of course, to the things that both Andrew and Ernie mentioned that are going to be included in there, or we hope to be included in there. So we don't have a resolution on that yet. We expect it to be voted on this week, though. The census is still counting. So the good news is that our district and our community here in Astoria is at a higher percentage than the city as a whole, but we have a lot more of our community to count. The federal census is currently knocking on people's doors, but you can still fill it out on your own at my2020census.gov. Thank you to everyone on the call who has already worked on this already. Astoria is doing pretty well, but we do have some more to go. So please encourage your family and friends who haven't completed the census to do so. Our office is, throughout the summer, our office has been honoring those that our community has lost to COVID-19 and celebrating our neighbors who've gone above and beyond to support the community. So if you have neighbors whose lives were lost or whose lives you would like celebrated, I have 2 forms that I know Richard has already shared with you, but we'll put them here again in case there's other people that you'd like to honor. And our office continues to assist constituents with federal casework. While our staff are following social distancing guidelines and working from home, we continue to accept cases at our website, ocasio-cortez.house.gov, or over the phone at 718-662-5970. And I'm happy to answer questions if anybody has them. You let me know, Richard.
Yeah, I will. I have one question for you, actually. I've often wondered about this. With the census, does the government actually, of the percentage that's not counted, okay, do they use sort of like an algorithm or something to assume what it would extend out to, or are they just not counting it and that's it, and it doesn't exist? So I'm always curious to know about that.
Yeah, so there's multiple steps to the count. The first step to the in-person count. So of course we did the self-response where they did the mailers in your mail, the postcards for you to go online and do it, and then they actually sent out something for you to fill it out in person for people who didn't do that. Multiple reminders. The next step is that people knock on your door. They do a first round where they knock on your door to see if you're home. They go and do a second round of the same thing. After the third time, if they've missed you 3 times and you still haven't responded yourself, then the census will knock on your neighbor's door or the superintendent or something like that and ask them if they know who lives in the apartments or the homes that have not responded. So that's sort of the way that they cover the people who don't respond. But beyond that, there isn't really an extrapolation. That is the actual count that the census does. So there's not an extrapolation outside of that count, but that last final step of the count to try to catch the people who were never contacted is sort of an estimate. But that's why we will continue to encourage people to fill it out themselves, because that the self-response rate is the most accurate count that the most accurate part of the count that happens. So up until the very end, we should continue to encourage people to fill it out themselves if they haven't yet responded, or even if they had someone knock on their door and they have a change, you can go and fill it out yourself and it will get balanced with whatever response happened before.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thanks for the clarity. Good. Victor, were there any questions at YouTube? I guess not. I have nothing in Facebook, but as again, you covered all the bases, so nobody has any questions.
Yeah. Well, and Ernie made a point, which I'll just say here, which is that the court ruled that the September 30th, if the September 30th deadline was not allowed. What it didn't say was what the deadline should be, and so the administration immediately came back to say that it was going to be October 5th, extending it by only 1 week. So we're waiting to see what the court's going to rule on that statement to see what the actual deadline is. Point being, we should all behave as if it's ending very soon and continue to push as hard as we can until we get final word on it. It's really important for our communities for representation, funding, and all the other things that we get a full and complete count.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Okay, so next, a principal presentation that we're going to have. And we like to, at OANA, present different projects, infrastructure projects in general that are coming up in our area that affect us all. And we've invited the Port Authority of New York, New Jersey to make a presentation on the Airtrain, which is in conjunction with the redevelopment or the reconstruction of LaGuardia Airport was built to help the transportation issues. So we're very pleased to have Hersh Parekh join us, who will make a presentation on what's going on. And Hersh, thank you for joining us.
Great. Thank you, Richard. Let me just figure out how to share my screen again. And we will get started. Okay, does that work?
We got it.
Great. Okay. Well, again, Richard, thank you very much for having us from the Port Authority to present about the Airtrain project. As Richard mentioned, my name is Hersh Parekh, Director of Government and Community Relations for Airport Redevelopment at the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. And today I'm here to present to you about the LaGuardia Airtrain project, which is currently in the middle of a draft environmental impact statement. So basically an environmental review that is led by the FAA. So I have a presentation here that I will run through, and then I'm happy to open it up to some questions. So let's get started. Before we get into the Airtrain, though, I wanted to just provide some context about the existing, currently underway redevelopment of LaGuardia Airport. So it should be no surprise to anybody that as recently as 3 years ago, LaGuardia was ranked as the worst, if not one of the worst airports in the country, by travelers, by newspapers, by tourists, by anybody. And those were the bad old days. But a new day is dawning, a new era is dawning at LaGuardia Airport since we began construction for the new LaGuardia about 4 years ago. The redevelopment of LaGuardia promises to transport LaGuardia from the worst in the nation to the first. This picture you see on your screen is taken from the other side of the Grand Central Parkway, from the eastbound side of the Grand Central Parkway facing the airport. And what you see in front of you is the brand new Terminal B that just opened up back in June. And you see the iconic air traffic control tower in the background there. So what is part of the new airport? There is get to the new airport. This was a multi-year process, as I mentioned. About 5 years ago, Governor Cuomo announced a vision plan for a brand new LaGuardia. A year later, we broke ground on Terminal B. A year after that, we broke ground on Terminal C. And every year since then, we've been making tremendous progress, opening the first parking garage in February of 2018, the first new concourse for Terminal B that December, the first new concourse for Delta in Terminal C in October of 2019. And then most recently, opening up the brand new Arrivals and Departures Hall, that big building you see on the Grand Central Parkway with the glass front, in June. And then the second concourse of Terminal B partially opened just a few weeks ago. So really making tremendous progress from the announcement of the vision plan to now, building a brand new LaGuardia, 2 new terminals, a whole new airport. So what you see here is every component of the new LaGuardia. You see the 2 new arrivals and departures halls, Terminal B and C. There are 6 new concourses. There will be a central hall that connects the terminals, and there'll be a brand new roadway network for the airport. And in red, you see how much of the airport, the new airport, is already open. For Terminal B, about 75 to 80% of the new airport at Terminal B is already open. And over at Terminal C, the Delta terminal, as I mentioned, you see in the distance in the rendering in front of you, the new concourse opened in October of 2019. So again, we make tremendous progress keeping this project on time, on schedule, and on budget. Even in the middle of a pandemic, we've been able to achieve some of these major milestones, and a large portion of that credit goes to the men and women of labor that are building this project from the Building and Construction Trades Council. So we're very appreciative of the work that they're doing, as well as our partners that are building the airport. At Terminal B, we have LaGuardia Gateway Partners, and at Terminal C, Delta Airlines. So this is the brand new LaGuardia. It's really unfortunate that we had to open the new terminal in the middle of a pandemic this past June, when flight volumes have been tremendously low. But I wanted to give folks a sense of what the new LaGuardia looks like. The photo you see in front of you is the brand new arrivals and departures hall. It's 50% larger than the old central terminal building. Much more spacious, much more natural light flowing in, especially in COVID. All of the new space allows for appropriate distancing. There is many COVID protocols and procedures in place, such as requiring face masks, hand sanitizing, touchless features, and like I said, all of the new space allows for the appropriate distancing. It also utilizes technology to safely and efficiently move people and screen baggage. So the photo you see in front of you is the security screening line at the new Terminal B. Very different from what you saw at the old LaGuardia, much more spacious, much more efficient, much easier to move people quickly so they can get to their gates and board their flights. The new LaGuardia also has extensive new concessions. So this is on the concessions level of the new Terminal B. You see some of the new food and beverage options on the screen there. We have things like Junior's, a Brooklyn Diner, Lazzaro's, many other food and beverage and retail options in the new Terminal B, and we expect those to continue in the new Terminal C as well. The new Terminal B is also home to 4 significant art installations. It's a building that was developed with art in mind as well, to make sure that there is some creativity, energy, and buoyancy to the terminal. You have some vistas that showcase the skyline of New York City. There is a mural against the back wall of the Terminal B, one of the largest indoor murals in the country. And then you have a sculpture by Sarah C. In the center, and then also in the concessions area upstairs, some fun, whimsical bench seating area. So really a magnificent new airport, new terminal, really the new LaGuardia. People that have landed at the airport have been confused if they've landed at the wrong airport because of how beautiful and spacious and all of the art and everything that's at the new airport. And it's not just us saying it. We've been getting rave reviews from press across the board. Forbes, the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Queens Chronicle, The Points Guy. And this is just a small sampling of the headlines talking about the new Terminal B and the new LaGuardia Airport. Really, like I said, it's a total 180-degree difference from the old LaGuardia, and the experience is exactly that, an entirely different, so tremendously better than what customers and others experience at the old LaGuardia. But there's still one big problem, and that's access. Even though we are redoing the roadway network, the roads around the airport are still incredibly congested, and don't use the current roadway traffic patterns as any indicator, because during COVID, many people have not been driving. The traffic has been moving much more freely. But prior to COVID, and when air travel does return, we do expect to see congested roadways that will create unreliable travel times to the airport. People budgeting anywhere from 40, 50 minutes, an hour and a half to make sure they reach their flight on time. And all of that contributes to air pollution and greenhouse gas emissions that severely impact the local residential community that is right across the parkway from LaGuardia. It's bad, it's been getting worse, and like I said, once air travel returns, we do anticipate a return to that status quo. LaGuardia is also the only major East Coast airport without a direct rail connection. So the only way to get to the airport right now is on the roads, whether it's by for-hire vehicle, Ubers, Lyfts, taxis, personal vehicles, hotel shuttles, or even MTA buses. It's all on the roadway network, so you're impacted by traffic, weather, accidents, anything like that can really impact your trip to the airport. So what we've seen and what we believe strongly is that the only solution here is to build a rail mass transit link to LaGuardia. That's the only way we believe that people will get out of cars off of their local roadways. We've seen the success of the JFK Airtrain that has surpassed any projections from when it first opened. And so we know that rail mass transit is the only solution here. So our proposed LaGuardia Airtrain project will provide a 30-minute or less trip from Midtown to LaGuardia. It will give you that reliability and predictability that you currently don't have on the roads, and there will be a seamless connection at Metz Willets Point. So it's going to be a very short, easy trip from Midtown to LaGuardia. So here's an overview of what the connection will look like. Passengers looking to get to the airport will board the Long Island Railroad either at Penn Station or at Grand Central and take that to Willets Point. At Willets Point, they would take the Airtrain to LaGuardia. 16 minutes from Midtown and then 6 minutes from LaGuardia to the airport, 30 minutes or less. The reason we are focused on the people coming from Penn Station and Grand Central is because if we look at the where our customers are coming from, 50% come from Manhattan alone, and 25%, 1 in 4 people that travel into or out of LaGuardia come from Midtown. And that is the major source of the traffic that is on the Grand Central Parkway, the BQE, the local roads. That is what's creating it. So by getting as many of those people off the roads as we can, it will ease the congestion on the roads and reduce the pollution, the greenhouse gases that congestion creates. What are some of the benefits of LaGuardia Airtrain? As I mentioned, predictable, reliable, and sustainable airport access. There will be a set schedule. You'll know exactly when your trains depart, what time you'll get to the airport. No need to worry about subjecting yourself to the unpredictability of the roads. You'll also reduce traffic on the local roadways by getting those passengers out of cars, out of Ubers and Lyfts and taxis, and then getting them onto rail mass transit, which also has the benefit of reducing greenhouse gas emissions and air pollution. This project also means 3,000 union construction jobs. At a time where we see unemployment is in the double digits across New York City, this is going to be a project that will create thousands of jobs, and it'll be built by union labor, the men and women of organized labor that have already been building our airport, keeping it on schedule, on budget. It also means hundreds of millions of dollars in contracting opportunities for local businesses and MWBEs. We see the amount of hurt that businesses and especially MWBEs are facing right now in light of the reduced economic activity. And there have been reports put out by many, many people showing that many MWBEs may not survive past COVID. So this project means new opportunities for local businesses, minority businesses, women-owned businesses, and we have a track record of delivering. To date, on the existing LaGuardia redevelopment program, we've been able to award more than $1.4 billion in contracts to minority and women-owned businesses. We've also been able to award more than $500 million, that's more than $500 million, to local businesses based in Queens. We're very proud of that, and we expect to continue that with the Airtrain. The Airtrain, we also project, will have up to 10 million riders. We know an Airtrain works. Like I've said, we've seen it at JFK. We've seen it at Newark. rail mass transit works. People ride it to get to where they need to go to. The other benefit of our proposed project is we do not take any private property, and there is zero construction in any residential areas. Let me show you what I mean by that. Well, my apologies, before I get to that. The benefits of LaGuardia, of the LaGuardia Airtrain. So, as Richard mentioned, we are in the middle of the FAA's environmental review. Just last week, there were a number of virtual public hearings that allowed members of the community to voice their opinion about the project. And over the course of the past few weeks, we've seen some really supportive, positive headlines about the project. Hope Knight from the Greater Jamaica Development Corporation, which has a lot of experience with the JFK Airtrain, wrote an op-ed about the potential for success for the LaGuardia Airtrain, again, based on the success of JFK. We saw nearly 100 stakeholders, organizations, business groups, community groups, labor unions, aviation, transit groups, write a letter in support of the Airtrain, and that includes the chambers of commerce in all 5 boroughs. We've seen strong support from labor. They believe, we believe, that this is the project that will be a major contribution to the economic stimulus New York needs to get back on track. We also saw an op-ed in the Daily News by Sam Schwartz and other well-known transportation leaders, really looking at all of the other alternatives that were offered by the FAA, by the community, and coming to the conclusion that our proposal is the best option to build the Airtrain, to finally build the Airtrain. For those of you that have been around for a little while, you may recall that back about 20 or 30 years ago, there was a proposal to build an Airtrain that was that did not move forward for a number of reasons. And this is the best option to build a rail mass transit link to LaGuardia now. It's also important that we've identified an alignment that works. We believe it's the best one. All of the comments you saw on the previous slide agree it's the best one. And the FAA, in their draft environmental impact statement that they released last month, agrees. They conducted their own thorough independent analysis of more than 40 alternatives. And their own analysis found that the alignment that we propose, that we are proposing to build, is the best one to build this rail mass transit link to the airport. So here's that alignment. It connects to the airport from Willets Point, as you see on the map. On the right-hand side, you see Willets Point with Citi Field and the U.S. Tennis Stadium on the right, and you see the connection to LaGuardia. It hugs the northern edge of the Grand Central Parkway, separated from the community on the other side of the parkway by the 8-lane highway. It then cuts across the corner of Citi Field and ends at Willets Point. As I mentioned previously, this alignment is fully on public land. It requires no taking of private property, residential or commercial, and it's separated from the community by the Grand Central Parkway. Whereas the JFK Airtrain is built down the median of the Van Wyck Expressway, there is even greater of a buffer between the community and this Airtrain. Another important component of this is, in addition to all the benefits I mentioned previously, by virtue of the alignment that we have put forth, we are adjacent to the Flushing Bay Promenade, which is the waterfront park area at Flushing Bay that's adjacent to the airport. And because our alignment is adjacent to it, it gives us the opportunity to invest $25 million into improving that park. That park has not seen any investment since it was first opened about 20 or so years ago. And with the current state of the city's finances and the Parks Department's budget, it's unlikely to see much of any investment for the near future. But we expect that we can invest $25 million to make it a nicer, beautiful, enhanced park that can be better utilized by the local community and any user of the park. So it's a really important benefit that will tremendously help the local community. So let me just go through these last few slides that show what the passenger journey may look like. You start at Penn Station at the new Moynihan Train Hall, or you can start at Grand Central, take the Long Island Railroad to Willets Point. At Willets Point, you will then take an elevator up to the Airtrain platform, and then you board the Airtrain, and you get to LaGuardia at the East Station first, which is Terminal C, Delta, and then the Terminal B station, which is the terminal operated by LaGuardia Gateway Partners. So that's a snapshot of the Airtrain project. I'm happy to take questions. But before I do that, let me just end with saying the Airtrain is going through a public review process right now, and we've seen tremendous support from all parts of the region, from all communities. And if you'd like to show your support for the project, you have the opportunity to do so right now. The information's on your screen. We can put that in the chat as well so people can access it. But now is the time to show your support for this project. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen and happy to open it up to questions.
Okay, first of all, Victor, did you get that link to put in the chat? Okay, if you could do that, that would be great. Thank you so much, Hersh, for the presentation. We at OANA like to always present all the views we can on particular subjects like this. I'd like to make a few comments before we go to the chat. There's a couple things that I had always thought of. I went to some of the presentations earlier. And, you know, we had this discussion before. I always thought that Jamaica would have made a more interesting hub as opposed to Willets Point, only because it's serviced by a lot more subway systems, and it's serviced by the entire Long Island Railroad instead of not just the North Shore. But I also understand that, you know, that's a very, very large capital investment, which may not be feasible right now. And, you know, personally, I think Willets Point, it would be good because it does not preclude the possibility of doing that sometime in the future. I worked in the airport for many, many years at JFK. That's where I worked for over 20 years. And having a seamless transit between the airports could allow at some point for utilization of connections between airports. It's not used now because there is no reliable transit, but it could develop into that. So that's one of my thoughts. And my other thought was also that is there any discussions on with the city of New York on extending the ferry to the Marine Air Terminal? So those are two things that I want to throw out there. And
sure.
If you'd like to comment on those.
I don't know if the first one was a question or just a comment about the
Well, one thing is one actually comment, or how much did you take Long Island into consideration for this? Because I seem to think that getting people from Long Island not to use their cars, not to have to come in with vehicles, is as big, and given COVID, probably even bigger than it was before in terms of Penn Station and Grand Central. You know, we've seen so much movement of population going out to the island that, you know, I think this is a huge positive, actually. You know, for me, the biggest positive for Queens out of all this, I know it really doesn't do a lot for the commercial development in a lot of areas. There's not a lot of stops like a subway, but it does keep our environment much cleaner. And that is a huge thing, particularly for Astoria. You know, we are known as Asthma Alley, and anything we can do between vehicles and energy plants and things like that to reduce that, you know, it's just extending the lifespan of people who live here. And that's very important.
So let me address each of the things you said. So firstly, on the connection to Jamaica. So as it stands right now, there is not a demand for transfer from one airport to the other. You know, and LaGuardia and Kennedy really serve very different types of travelers. LaGuardia is much more of a business traveler airport than Kennedy is. Kennedy, as you know, and all of your audience knows, it's an international airport, so a lot more international travel, families, things like that. Whereas LaGuardia has a much larger share of business travelers. Not to say that there aren't tourist or leisure travelers at LaGuardia, there certainly are. But if you look at all of our airports in the Port Authority network, LaGuardia really is up there in terms of having a very high share of travelers traveling for business purposes and looking to get into or out of the Midtown area. So that's a big reason why we proposed our project as we did. Regarding the connection for Long Island, again, you know, looking at the breakdown of customers, are the largest portion of the customers from any single region is from Midtown. Now, of course, there's travelers that come from the other boroughs, come from Long Island and things like that. But in terms of what community is responsible, what single community is responsible for the most people is Midtown. And that is also the source of so much of the car traffic and vehicle traffic that causes the congestion, creates the pollution. And so, that's one of the biggest reasons why this project is sort of oriented towards that audience. That's not to say that others are not able to use it, right? Granted, it's not going to provide that 30-minute or less commute for someone that may be looking to get to LaGuardia from Long Island, but it still provides that reliable and predictable travel time. Whereas right now, you could budget 30 minutes, and if you get hit with an accident on the road that closes traffic, you could be facing an hour or more. Whereas this, what the train schedules are. The trains from Willets Point to the airport will be running every 4 minutes, 4-minute headways. So it still provides that reliable and predictable travel time that currently really doesn't exist for LaGuardia.
Okay. And the ferry?
The ferry, yes. So the Marine Air Terminal accounts for probably 10% or less of the flights and the travelers using LaGuardia. So it's one of, we do get questions about why the Airtrain doesn't connect to the Marine Air Terminal. That's one reason, because there is such a low number of people that use the Marine Air Terminal. There was also, many years ago, when Delta operated its shuttles out of the Marine Air Terminal, there was a ferry connection to Terminal A, which was not very well used. And I understand that now the ferry network is much different, much better, much more robust. And is that something that can be considered down the road? I don't want to say no. I don't want to say yes. Right now we're here talking about the Airtrain and what's down the road. We will deal with that at the appropriate time.
Okay. Okay. So now we will go to the chat. Okay. So. Well, first of all, from AFC, he's got 3 different comments in there. Okay, first part. With actual wait times, the Airtrain route would be slower than the current E/Q70. It doesn't serve areas where airport workers live. The fare will be 6 to 7 times the current fare. It would provide no benefit for the vast majority of New Yorkers who rarely never go to the airport, unlike the Q70 bus lanes or an N train extension. Besides the governor, who is this project for?
So we did a very, very, well, thank you for the question. We did a very extensive ridership survey, talking to real people at the airport. And based on that survey and the analysis, we project up to 10 million people using the Airtrain. So that is a significant number of people. Regarding the Q70 bus, there have been some really important improvements made to the Q70 in recent years. And even with those improvements, the percentage of people that use the buses to get to the airport remains in the single digits. More than 90% of people traveling to the airport use some sort of other vehicle, whether it's Ubers, Lyfts, personal vehicles, hotel shuttles, things like that. We just have not seen the improvements in that rail mass transit could provide. Trains and rail mass transit is a much better way to get people out of their cars, off the roads, and to address the issue of pollution and emissions. That is, really a big problem. And it's just, like I said, the data has shown that people are not taking the Q70 or the other buses that currently provide access to the airport. Regarding employees and others, while many employees that work at LaGuardia do live in the vicinity of LaGuardia, many of them drive a very short distance. They walk, many of them. So this would not be for them. I wholeheartedly admit that. However, there are many employees that also come from other parts of the region, and this would also benefit them getting to their job site on time, reliably, predictably, without having to be subjected to traffic.
Okay. Oh, he also had a last comment, I guess, in reference to the Streets blog article that you he says it's not in support of the Airtrain, as you stated. At best, it's a summary of the fact that some other op-eds were written. Why be dishonest?
So that slide was showing the press around the project. There was a Streets blog post that spoke about a letter that was signed by 12 transportation experts, people that have decades upon decades of experience running transportation agencies, building transportation projects, dealing with the reality of building transportation projects and running agencies. And the Streets blog post agreed, summarized that support. So am I saying Streets blog is for or against the project? No. My point of sharing that headline was to show the press that has come up in recent weeks around the support that this project has earned from so many different audiences, including these experts that really looked at all the other alternatives and came to the conclusion, like the FAA did, that our alternative is the best way to build rail mass transit to the airport.
Okay. I'm not sure. I'm going to have to paraphrase this. I guess this is from Dory Kokoros. It's specifically people coming from Penn Station, Grand Central Station, with more people working from home. I guess she's saying, did you take into account the fact that you're going to be losing people going through these hub stations because they're working from home in residential areas and not in Manhattan?
So it's important to note that this project would not come online until 2025. This is not a project that will be built tomorrow and be a short-term construction project. We are building in the short term for the long term. Airtrains are 20, 30-year projects, or excuse me, not projects, 20 or 30-year things to provide access to the airport. So we fully anticipate that, after COVID passes, after after a vaccine has been created and distributed, that people will get back to work. People will once again resume travel. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. We've seen many times in the past where emergencies, very sort of dire circumstances have impacted people working in offices, people flying, and each time the industry has returned, and we anticipate that this will once again happen. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And within 5 years, that the industry and people traveling for business, we do anticipate will recover to pre-pandemic levels.
I hope so. Okay, from Neil, with the closure of Rikers Island, perhaps we could reimagine the Q100 to run between Brooklyn, Astoria to LaGuardia. If it is an SBS, would that work? Not sure what SBS is.
So it's the select bus service. It's the
all right.
Yeah.
Not the small business service.
Yeah, no. So again, I go back to my point earlier that the bus service has not been as successful in getting people off the roads and using public transit. It's still in the single-digit % in the number of people using buses, whether it's from Manhattan on the M60, from Queens on the Q70, or many of the other routes that connect to the airport. It remains in the single digits. And so it's just not as effective in getting people off the roads, out of their cars, and onto public transit. Rail mass transit is the way to achieve that goal.
Good. Exactly. I have a question. Exactly how will the power be generated for this? Where will it be housed?
Yeah, so there are going to be some substations that are part of the construction project that will be built along the corridor for the Airtrain.
And they'll be drawing from Canadian Power or something, or you're not aware exactly what how that's going to happen?
I don't want to speak incorrectly, so I would say it is discussed in depth in the draft environmental impact statement that the FAA has released and posted on their website. There's also a map in their report that shows the locations of those substations. So I encourage you to take a look at that map. And also it's there's a short write-up, but a thorough write-up of the power needs and sort of the sources of that for the Airtrain.
Okay, great. Okay, are there any other questions? I am checking Facebook. I think I have everything. And I don't know, is there any, Victor, just to confirm, anything else on YouTube?
No, the YouTube is working in the chat, so you would see it.
Okay. All right. Well, listen to everyone that's watching this, and to Hersh, to everybody. It's a great presentation. I've seen this thing evolve, and I'm looking forward to. I just do remember the old LaGuardia, and before Biden and after Biden. So. I'm looking forward to it. I was lucky enough to be invited to the opening of Terminal B, which I really appreciated. I hope that soon we can all meet in the new terminal as it opens. And Hersh, if anybody has further questions while they're watching this, they can watch it later because this is recorded. You can just email us and we will forward the questions to Hersh and to the Port Authority. And we'll get you a question. Looks like we have one more question here. I'm sorry. One more comment. Okay, again from AFC. Rejecting buses because people don't ride them now rather than trying cheap solutions like a clearer transfer and dedicated bus lanes to improve buses shows that the solution was pre-decided.
Yeah, so what I would suggest is I encourage the viewer to review the FAA's alternatives analysis. It is a very long document that looked at about 45 or 46 different alternatives, including bus lanes and bus connections. And they came to the conclusion that those were not able to meet the goals of this project. I would also encourage folks to read the op-ed as well as the open letter that was written by the 12 transportation leaders that have generations of experience building and running transportation. They also agreed that buses are not the solution to get people out of cars. Can buses help? Absolutely. But again, to get the numbers that we need to get people out of cars to ease congestion, rail mass transit is the only way to do it. We see the success of it at JFK. We know this Airtrain will be successful. We hope the FAA will approve the project upon the conclusion of the environmental review. And we look forward to continuing to engage with the community as we've been doing regularly for the past, I don't know how many years, but it's been many, many years. And we look forward to continue doing that because it's an important voice in this process.
Okay, and we'd love to have you back anytime you come up with more information. We appreciate it. You've come before us a number of times. So in pre-COVID days when we could actually eat dinner. Okay, so it was great. I'm looking.
I do miss dinner, Richard. I'm hungry.
Yeah, that was our signature, was having good food. So anyway, I'm looking forward to that happening again. Again, like I said, if anybody has any other questions, they can email us. And my last comment about this is that, to me, the most important thing is the health of the citizens around Astoria. The N line, I don't think, works as an extension like some people say, because two reasons. Number one, it's already chock full to begin with. Number two is that you'd have to take land from local Astoria residents in order to extend it. So, and number three, it doesn't connect with the Long Island Railroad, which I think is really important. I think that the LIRR section will become as important as the Penn Station section at some point. So anyway, thank you so much. Everyone, we will have a meeting hopefully in a couple weeks, but it's not confirmed. We're still working and talking with some presenters. So just watch your email and we'll notify whether we do have another meeting in October or we wait till November. We're not sure at this point. So thank you for joining us, everyone, and have a wonderful evening.